tell you the URL, but then you might feel compelled to watch the live stream, but you're here, so don't do that. But also that means we're recording this whole thing, so if we speak too fast or you want to relive the glory that is tonight's meetup, you can check it out. We'll post the link to it on the meetup group or something. So we're going to talk tonight about chef delivery, and it's going to be myself and Maggie Walker. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to let Maggie introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am a UI developer here at Chef. So I work on Chef.io, Learn Chef, downloads, all docs, all those things make the UI really shiny and beautiful and nice to work with. And I also work with delivery every day, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And before I was a developer, fun fact about me, I was a professional hula hooper. Really. So if you want to talk about that and non-tech related things, I would love to talk to you about that. But yes.
Unfortunately, I didn't know that until tonight. Otherwise,
I'd be happy to do that next time.
Awesome. Great. And I'm Nathan Harvey. I like to make slides with pictures of myself on them, so if you get tired of looking at me, you can instead look at me. Which is good. Thank you. I am an occasional farmer who loves eggs, and some of you know what those jokes mean, and they're very funny, and others of you should check out those two URLs. I also run a podcast called The Food Fight Show. It is an irregular podcast in that we almost never have shows, but sometimes we do. We had one just a couple of weeks ago, which was, I should know what it was about, but I don't remember what it was about. It was about learning reviews. Rob was on that show, so we talked, it's kind of about postmortems, but it's passe to call them postmortems, so now they're learning reviews, which is better. You can follow me on Twitter if you misspell my name like my dad did. The rule in my house was mom picks the names and dad misspells them, and so he misspelled my name and all of my siblings' names. And if you ask me later, I'll tell you how they're all misspelled, which is awesome. My worst favorite story about having a misspelled name, when I was a sophomore in high school, my English teacher returned a paper to me in which she corrected the spelling of my name because I hadn't learned by the time I was in high school, which is also why I speak gooder English than you, because I no longer paid attention to that teacher. For some reason, I didn't like her. But we're not here to talk about me tonight. We're here to talk about delivery. So what is chef delivery? How many of you have seen chef delivery before? Great. And have used it before?
Tutorial.
Okay, the tutorial. How'd that go?
I'm still
Be
working
honest.
through it.
You're still working through it, okay?
Yeah. I've run into issues with some of the clarity of the instructions, but also I'm experiencing my issues on my own end.
Yeah.
Lots of little details like, the IDs for your AMIs, your security groups, and your PPC,
Right.
Your Dutch chef directory, and all that stuff.
Yes. There's a lot to it. Yeah. Okay. I haven't been through that tutorial myself, but we're going to make a change to that tutorial tonight. We're going to make it better. Right, Maggie?
So much better.
It's going to be so much better.
So much better.
Yeah, so we're going to actually use learnchef.com tonight. We're going to deploy a change through that. So you can, and it's like we're doing it live in our delivered environment. So you can look at the site before we make the change, and then when we're done, you will see the change that we made there. So that'll be cool. But so what is delivery? Delivery is our proven workflow. Over the years, Chef has been working with many, many customers, community members, about what does it mean to continuously deliver change throughout your organization or across your organization. And what we've come up with is this thing called chef delivery. It allows you to move very fast with safety. Everyone who decides what they want to do as continuous delivery or continuous deployment learns very quickly that continuous delivery without a safety net is bonkers, like you should not do that. And so we want you to move very fast, but we want to provide the safety net and the sort of building of confidence as you move through your workflow and through your pipeline. And so we're going to talk and sort of demo and drill into that. So one of the best things about delivery, or one of the things that make it unique, is that you have a shared workflow that's shared across your projects and your teams. So when we talk about delivery, what you might think of is how do you get your cookbooks into your production environment? How do you deliver cookbook changes? But chef delivery can be used for more than just cookbooks. We can use it to deliver any type of application or infrastructure change. Really what it comes down to is you have a change that you want to push through your organization. Now, as it turns out, many of the services that you're deploying and giving to your end users today are made up of multiple components. Like microservices is a thing, the applications that you run on top of infrastructure, maybe that infrastructure is managed with Chef, and your applications, I don't know, maybe they're a Rails application. So these are two different projects, but they work together to deliver that service. So with delivery, what you have are a number of acceptance pipelines, one acceptance pipeline for each one of those components, and then they all come together into this common delivery pipeline that consists of the union, rehearsal, and delivery environment. We're going to drill into a little bit of detail on each one of these. I don't want to spend too much time here. I want to come back to this slide towards the end, because what I want to do is not talk about a whole lot of theory. I actually want to show you code, and we're going to push a change through the environment. So this is what the delivery pipeline looks like. You will submit a change. That change will be verified automatically by delivery. We'll talk about exactly what that means. And then a person will come along and approve your change. And with the approval of the change, what we've done with delivery, it's not only a tool, but it reinforces the workflow and the best practices that you should have as teams. And one of the things that we believe makes for strong teams and makes for good DevOps is that you practice the 4I rule. And the 4I rule is simple. It states this: no code should make it into your customer's hands or into your delivered environment without at least 4 eyes looking at that code along that process. The good news is, for me, my code is production ready all the time. Right? But we don't actually believe that rule. Those of you who can't see me because all you see is the slides on the stream, I'm wearing glasses, so I have 4 eyes. So my code is good to go every time I write it. And when I look around the room, I say that maybe 40% of us are as good as me when it comes to writing code, which means that that code is probably really bad. I'm sure your code is not as bad as mine. But we go through this approval process. We then build an artifact. It goes through acceptance. Once it's been in an acceptance environment, and we have a chance to actually look at that code and test it out, we can then push it through to delivered. So a human gets involved in the approval process as well as in the delivered phase of this pipeline. And then it gets pushed through union, rehearsal, and delivered. And what we're going to do next is sort of talk about all of the phases here and what happens in each one of these stages. And we're going to talk about it by showing you code. There's a problem, though. We talk here about submitting a change. Well, let's kind of back up. How does that change get submitted? We have to write code in order to submit that change. So when it comes to Chef, this is how you submit change. No. This is maybe a little bit more than just how you submit change. This is kind of a busy diagram. But what we're talking about, if what we were doing was writing a cookbook change that we wanted to deliver, we'd be sort of here in this local dev portion of this is the Chef workflow, this is the Chef toolset. So if you write a cookbook, you would use the Chef development kit, the Chef DK, to write that cookbook, you do local testing on that, and so forth. Once you're happy with it locally, you will then submit the change where it goes into Chef delivery. I'm going to pause here for a second and ask what questions can I answer for you so far. What's that? It does. It has a randomly generated number that switches out every 30 seconds, and so you never know exactly how to deliver it. You always change that. All right. Well, let's go and submit a change. Maggie, can you pull up just Learn Chef and let's look at the thing that we're going to change, because I'm not sure what we're going to change.
Sure.
This looks like a good change. So maybe scroll just a little bit. Yeah, that's cool. So we're on learnchef.com. Oh, this is the local.
Technically, we're on
This is the local
host.
version, but if we went to the real Learn Chef, we can look at the real thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Learn Chef, under tutorials, we have a tutorial that you're currently going through about building out your own continuous delivery pipeline with Chef Delivery. One of the things that we have here is a little info block that talks about Chef Delivery uses Git. So Git is the prescribed source code control tool that you should use, or source code management tool that you should use when using delivery. And this little info box says, hey, if you don't know anything about Git, what you should do is maybe stop for a second and go learn a little bit about Git. And this is a very true thing. If your version of source code management is not back, what you should do is not listen to anything else I say tonight. go over there and learn Git. We don't have anyone over there that can help you, but the internet is over there. You can also go here and find out where the documentation is. I have to tell you, I hate this info box because it's not my biggest pet peeve with hyperlinks, but it is a pet peeve that I have with hyperlinks. So this sentence says, if you're unfamiliar with Git, you might want to check out the documentation. And the word documentation is linked. Well, studies have shown that good hyperlinks contain 3 to 7 words, and maybe they start with an action verb. I think that the developer of this page maybe was a little bit lazy. I think this hyperlink should be check out the documentation, not just link on documentation. Would you all agree with that?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for agreeing. The thing that I'm really happy it didn't say was click here to check out the documentation. click here is my #1 pet peeve for links, but I think we should fix this. So Maggie, let's. I don't really know how this thing even works. Maybe you could talk about how LearnChef is built, and maybe you can fix the link for us.
For sure. So all of the tutorials are written in Markdown. So to change this, it's really easy. We just have to take this bracket here and move it over. Whoa, that was really hard. So yeah, so that's the whole change that we need to make. It also runs on middleman, so it live uploads or live reloads for us. So we can go up here. Woohoo! Check out the documentation is our link now. Fantastic.
All right, so Maggie's just made a change, and of course it's a very simple change that you might find this surprising. We knew we were going to change in advance. But the point is, like, the change doesn't matter. It's a simple change or it's a very complex change. The important bit is how do we move this through Chef Delivery? And so what are you going to do next now that you've made that change?
So from there, it works exactly the same as any Git workflow that you have. So we're working on a branch right now. So I have my branch that has my name and then delivery demo on there. And so I say git status, and we see that we've changed that one file. And from here, it's literally the exact same as just pushing up to a branch. So, oh yeah, of course. So, like I said, from here, it is exactly the same as just pushing up to a branch normally. So we add all of our changes. And we say, change the terrible hyperlink. So terrible. And then from here, we just push up to the branch. That's all it takes. And so then from here, I would go back to the GitHub page for this, and we see that we have a pull request. So from here, we say create pull request. And then this is going to go through all of those the delivery checks that he was talking about before.
Awesome. So maybe we can switch back to this slide.
For sure.
So what's happened here is we've submitted the change, and now we've entered into a stage in delivery called verify. And the verify stage is going to run 3 different phases for us. And the way that delivery works, we have these predefined stages. So the first stage that we're in is verify. And each stage is going to be made up of a set of predefined phases. So we have a lint test, a syntax test, and a unit test that are going to execute against this. Now, if you're familiar with a cookbook workflow, what do you think the lint test might be? Rubocop. Yeah, that might be one of the things. What else might you use to lint? Food critic. Food critic might be another thing that you use here. What about for syntax checking?
Ruby-C.
Ruby-C or maybe knife cookbook test. Either one of those things would work. And then what about for unit tests? What would you use for a JeffSpec would be executed here. So what's going to happen is in delivery is automatically going to run the lint, syntax, and unit tests for us. The problem is we just talked about Food Critic, Rubocop, JeffSpec. Does Markdown use any of those things? Nope, sure doesn't. So what are we going to use in the Markdown thing? We'll come back to answer that. But another thing that's going to happen right now, can you go to the delivery user interface?
Yeah, for sure.
Because in addition to sort of orchestrating all of these changes for you, The delivery interface also makes it very easy to see the changes as they're moving through your pipeline. So here we're in the Chef Web Learn project. You see, here's the pull request that Maggie just created. Change the terrible hyperlink. And what happens if we drill into that? We can see that it's running the verify stage now. And what's happening right now is the unit is, I don't know, is it running?
It's running, yeah.
It's running. And then lint and syntax are kind of queued up and they're waiting. What does this look like? Oh, unit just passed. Oh, speaking of that, that's awesome. What does this look like in the Git interface? This is a project that's on GitHub, so what does that look like?
So on GitHub, it just tells you whenever it's passed, or whether it's been skipped or whatever.
So this is really interesting. What we've done here is configured a user with this repository that is the delivery user. So it has this GitHub integration with delivery. So if what you do with your projects right now is manage them following a GitHub workflow, you can continue to use that same workflow and have it fully integrated into delivery. Yes?
Can it be GitLab?
Can it be GitLab instead of GitHub? It can definitely be GitHub Enterprise.
So when you say delivery user, you mean actually in the delivery GUI?
So we have created a delivery user as part of this project in GitHub, and that user has keys that allow the delivery server to actually update GitHub with these statuses.
Okay, so delivery user you're talking about is actually, in this case, specific to GitHub itself.
Yes, exactly. Now, if what you want to do is not manage your projects on GitHub, delivery also has a Git server built in, and so you can actually just do all of this exclusively in exclusively in delivery, right? So instead of checking out from GitHub, you could have just checked out from the delivery server, that Git repository, created a branch, done a delivery review, which would have been the same thing here as submitting a pull request. Yes?
Nathan, is this a public repo?
Is this a public repo? This is not a public repo. This is a private repo. So what you can't do is see what's happening right here. But Maggie can, because obviously she has special. Yeah, she's very special.
I also noticed, look at delivery has these organizations.
Yes.
Those are specific to delivery. They're not tied to GitHub organizations.
They're not tied necessarily to, like they could be tied to GitHub organizations, but not because.
Sure.
Just because that's how you set them up. Like they're not.
So you're not really the CIA.
What's that?
You're not really the CIA.
No, Maggie's part of the CIA.
I'm part of the CIA.
Okay.
So internally at Chef, we employ the CIA.
Oh, well, that's
Right? Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah.
government contracts. There's big money in them.
Yes. So the CIA stands for Corporate Infrastructure and Applications. Also, it's better just to think of the CIA.
Sure.
Yeah. Because Maggie is totally that cool. So this has passed the unit test, and what does it say there on lit and syntax? I can't really see it from here.
It says skipped.
It says skipped. So it has skipped these two phases. So it's weird because delivery comes with these predefined stages and phases, the verify stage with the unit, lint, and syntax phases. But we have control over what happens in each one of those phases. And for this particular app, we say we'll run some unit tests on it, but we don't care about doing lint and syntax checking. Well, what sort of lint testing would you do on a website?
Well, you could,
Grammar and spell check.
right.
That might be good.
Yeah, and we're working on implementing SCSS linting on our sites now. So we could have that. We're planning on adding that to Learn Chef. So that's something we could add.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like you have some sort of like chat apps thing or whatever, where it's add delivery approved, like delivery
Yes.
is a chatbot or something, or what?
Right.
That
So
was
there's
awesome.
so here's a cool thing, and this is a relatively new thing in delivery. If you haven't seen delivery for a couple of months, this is brand new, and I would want to show you now. What's happened is Chris Weber, who works all the time, and so of course he's
Yeah,
watching the pull
of course.
request obsessively. He saw that this pull request came in, and he's mentioned delivery, the delivery bot, and has said approve. So if we actually go to the delivery UI, what we can see is that this has completed the verify stage and is now, Chris came in and looked at it and has approved it, and now it's running through the approval stage. So maybe as I talk about this, maybe we can go back to the slides for a second, because I think that might help us describe this. So we submitted the change. delivery automatically ran the lint, syntax, and unit tests during verify. And then it stops for an approval process. And the question that's being asked here is, does this code change look good? So Chris has looked at Maggie's code change. We're practicing the 4i rule. Maggie doesn't wear glasses, so we have to have someone else verify her code. I think it's fair to say that we all verified her code. And it was a really dramatic change that you made. We're a little bit nervous about it.
Earth-shattering.
I think it's going to be
Yeah.
okay. Good thing we have all this testing. But so Chris has gone in and approved this. Now the way that he approved it was through following the same like GitHub process. He didn't do the merge this branch thing. He just said delivery approved. What would that look like if we'd done it in the delivery UI?
There's a button that says approve.
There's a button that says
Yes.
approve.
It's very simple.
Yes. So does the delivery allow you to iterate? Like, let's say you want to provide some feedback that says, oh, I think you should maybe change it like this.
Mhm.
So is there a way of how that flow works where you kind of go back to the person that originally offered it and they can resubmit the change?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly the same as with GitHub. So if he had commented on that and said, hey, I wish that you had moved the bracket to another word as opposed to that word, then I would have just made that change, push it up to the branch, and it would have been a pull request just the same as it would be with regular GitHub. So it's very simple to iterate and make changes.
Right. Okay, so now that he's approved it, we immediately move into the build phase. Another thing that continuous delivery, that Chef delivery enforces for us is this idea of continuous integration. And I don't know how you think about continuous integration, but I'll tell you how I used to think about continuous integration. I used to think that what continuous integration meant was when I cut a feature branch and started working on that feature branch, if I ran my tests continuously, that's continuous integration. Running your tests continuously on your feature branches. I'm here to tell you that that's not continuous integration. That's a lie. If you feel that way, I'm sorry, you're wrong. But also, I was totally wrong in the past. So what happened when Chris hit approve, the very first thing that happened was we did continuous integration. We took that change, and we've now merged it back into the master branch. Can we just look at that in maybe the GitHub UI?
Mm-hmm.
So we can see that he approved it, and it shows that it was approved. And here we can see that the commit was merged into master. So immediately this change has been merged into master. The idea behind continuous delivery and the way that you safely do continuous delivery is you start with continuous integration. You have short-lived feature branches that you are continuously integrating back into your master branch. So let's go back to the slides and talk about what else happens during this build phase. Now, after we've merged it into master, the next thing we do are the same things we did during the verify stage. We run lint, syntax, and unit. Why are we running these again? Seems duplicated.
Because you merged it.
Because we merged it, right? So there may have been another change that happened in the master branch since the last time we ran this. So let's run those things again to make sure that the merge happened cleanly and that we're still passing our lint, syntax, and unit. And once those have passed, we will then run security tests, quality tests, and then we have a publish phase where we're going to take the artifact that we've just built in this build process and publish off that artifact. How's the build process coming? Is it tough?
Let's see. Looks like it.
No, it's like deploy is running. Oh, right. So build is done, and now we've moved into acceptance. Yeah, you're totally right. What does it look like in GitHub right now?
Hooray. So in GitHub, it looks exactly the same.
But what happens if you scroll up? Doesn't show build phase there yet? Refresh. Refresh something.
Refresh.
Oh, look at that.
There they are.
Isn't that awesome? And sometimes GitHub just refuses to auto-refresh. But what we can see here is that the verify did its thing. Build is doing its thing, so the unit passed. The lint and syntax were skipped. Quality and security were skipped. We know that Learn Chef is a completely secure place, so it's fine. We don't even need to test that. And then we moved on to publish. And so from publish, the publish phase happens, and we'll talk about what happens for Learn Chef in a minute in the publish phase, but then we move into acceptance. So let's go back to the slide. So in acceptance, we have another set of phases. The first phase is going to be to provision an acceptance environment. So acceptance is where we're going to take this change for this particular project, actually put it on real hardware or into a real system. And in this case, we're actually going to provision and like put it into an S3 bucket, is where Learn Chef runs from. So we're going to publish it there. Maybe provision, if what you're doing is running a cookbook, maybe you want to spin up a cloud instance on which you're going to execute that cookbook. So that provision step maybe happens with Chef provisioning. And so what it could do is it could actually, at this point in time, go and create a new environment of machine images for you, a bunch of cloud instances. Or it could be that those were there from the last time and it will just reuse those. So we provision servers on which to run this project. We will then deploy this artifact that we've just built into that system, and then we'll run our smoke tests and our functional tests. So how's acceptance coming? Is it completed yet?
Let's see.
Well, it looks like the smoke is running.
Or functional is running.
Smoke is passed, functional is running. Can you just click on functional? What's going on there? So in the delivery UI, we can see the output of what each one of these tests is doing. And in a minute, I'll tell you, like, we'll break down exactly what happens.
And worth mentioning as well, where if any errors happen, those will show up here, so you can find what those errors might be.
Oh, it looks like that might have just completed.
Oh.
So what's running now? That was delivered? No.
That was functional.
This was the acceptance stage, and that was the functional test that it was running. So now we're in a state where we're ready to deliver this. Maybe just go back to the slides for a second, because this is where another human needs to come in. I wonder if Chris is watching and has already done this step. But now, whereas before we asked, does the code look good? Now maybe what we do is we bring in a product manager and ask, is this the right feature? Have we made the correct change? And so when we provision to an acceptance environment, there's actually a server that I could go to and look at the acceptance environment for Learn Chef. Instead of just looking at Maggie's local environment, I could look at the acceptance environment and see, is that link updated the way that I like? Is this something that's going to provide delight to our customers? If so, I can go either into the delivery UI and click the deliver button, or how else could I kick off that delivery?
I believe we always do hit the button in the delivery UI, but I believe you can also do deliver in GitHub.
Yes, totally can. So I wonder if Chris has done that yet. Should we check? Yes.
You might.
If you don't want to.
If you don't want to deliver it, it's fine. That will sit in the acceptance environment until you're ready to deliver it. And so what could happen is you could have another change that you want to push in. Like maybe what I want to deliver, I want to queue up 4 or 5 different changes. I want to change this link. There's a typo on this other page, and this one instruction set you're tripping up on. Like maybe we can be clearer on that. So we're going to change that. So maybe that's 3 different changes. We can let those queue up into acceptance until we're ready to say, okay, this set of changes I actually want to deliver.
But can anyone else deliver ahead of me? Behind me?
So if it's within this project, so within this repository, no.
Okay.
I'm super confident about that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the proper answer, and anyone who's here who knows better can certainly correct me or tell me that I'm right, or someone can lie and tell me that I'm right. But I think the proper answer is that what we want to do is you make changes to this repository, they're merged into master. So actually, if someone comes along and makes a change after you, but yours haven't been delivered yet, your changes are already in master, and their changes are now going to end up in master.
Now I'm talking about a different application.
Oh, a different application. Yeah, so that I want to come back to.
Okay.
So if you'll hold that question, that would be awesome.
Nathan, just a quick question.
Yes.
So when we're ready to click deliver,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be nice if we had some way to actually view the acceptance environment.
Yes.
Does delivery provide a way of delivering some sort of a hyperlink? Say, go see this, or here's the change, or?
Right. So from within delivery, what you can see the change that was made. So you can see the code changes, but that's not what you're after. I want to go look at acceptance.learnchef.com. Yeah, right? And so that URL does exist somewhere. So during that provision phase, we did spin up infrastructure on which this artifact has been deployed. I don't know if you know that URL off the top of your head.
I believe it's just learn-acceptance.
Yeah, that sounds like it might be the real thing. We'll find out really quick.
Yeah, that's it. All of ours follow a pattern, so it's always dash acceptance.
So here's our acceptance
You have to
environment.
know that, right?
What's that?
You have to know that.
Yes. So
So you cookbook can sort of like deliver a little blurb that just says, here's the results, go check out.
yeah, like that might be really handy.
We do have that integrated with Slack.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So we should see something in Slack.
I noticed when she was into the code view, there was something about, I saw Slack handler.
Yeah. So can you pull up
So
the Slack
that-
channel so we can see?
Yeah,
Like,
of
what
course.
does Slack say?
So it's really nice to have it give you notifications in Slack if you're just living in Slack talking to your coworkers like we do. And so you don't have to be paying attention to delivery UI, whatever. And so this gives you a notification whenever it goes through these phases. So it gives you that acceptance link right here with our Slack
So
integration.
it's hard to see because it's way down at the bottom of the screen.
I will try to make it bigger. Oh, wow, that's terrible. Oh, God.
There it is. I can read it too.
There we go.
It says, so delivery bot says Chef Web Learn acceptance functional has completed. So HTTPS learn-acceptance.chef.io is now ready for delivery. Please visit deliver it. I don't know where that leads to. But so clearly somehow we know how to build this notification.
Mhm.
Is that in the cookbook, that little message blurb?
Good question. That would be something that Chris Weber would be
Well, I
able to
can
answer.
answer that. So what happens in each one of these phases that we define is actually a recipe in the delivery cookbook for the project. So within that recipe, there's actually a Slack handler that's part of that. And so yes, the short answer is yes, it's in the cookbook, but
not in the UI.
not in the UI.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
But if you wanted to log something,
Look at it out there.
now,
Yes.
shouldn't that link start with visit deliberate, not just deliberate?
For real, like what's going on here? we should change that. So what we should now do is we should go and change the code that manages our delivery pipeline and make sure that that makes it through the delivery process. Right. Shall we deliver this change?
Sure.
How would you prefer to do it? Let's do a group poll. Do you want to match the delivery button or do you want to do @delivery deliver?
After the deliver, I want to see the integration.
Okay. All right. So now the change is ready to be delivered and Maggie has just kicked it off. Let's go back to the slides and talk about what happens now. So we built the right thing. This is the thing that we want to ship. We're happy to ship it. So what happens now is it moves into the union environment. And the union environment is going to follow a very similar set of phases as the acceptance stage did. The first thing we will do is provision hardware or provision servers on which to run this artifact. So as you might imagine, there's probably something called union-chef or union-learn.chef.io or something along those lines. It's probably at the end going to throw a thing into Slack. Let's go see that. So it's going to provision that environment for us. It's going to deploy the artifact for us, run our smoke, and our functional tests. Now, assuming all of this works well, it's then going to move on to the rehearsal environment, which is going to run the same set of steps. And then it's going to move into our delivered environment. And now, you may be sitting here and saying to yourself, what are these words, union and rehearsal and delivered? I call them things like integration and pre-production and production. And the reason that we use union and rehearsal and delivered is this. With delivery, not only are we giving you a new tool set for how to move changes through, but we're giving you a new workflow that you should follow. And we encourage your entire teams, all of your teams, to follow this same workflow. And what we want to do is give you a common understanding and common language for describing this pipeline. And so, how many of you run more than one application at the place where you work? And of those applications, like, do you have an environment called staging? Yeah, and does staging mean the same thing in every one of those different applications? Mostly, but there's that one that's a little bit nuanced, right? Well, we want to move away from that. What we want to talk about is this is your pipeline. There's a union environment, a reversal environment, and a delivered environment. And by simply changing the words, what we can do is have a common vocabulary across teams. When the pipeline breaks down, when a test breaks, when the build goes red, we can talk about it using these words. This is the language, this is the vocabulary of our delivered pipeline. And we find that by having that common shared vocabulary, that common unified pipeline across all of your projects, you actually can work a lot more efficiently and better as teams. And it truly changes the way you think about how does your code, how does change flow through your organization. Yeah.
So are the builds happening on the delivery server, or do you have build nodes that you farm out jobs to?
Yes, it's definitely the latter. And so what happens is the delivery server is orchestrating this pipeline for you. And so the builds are actually happening on what we call build nodes, which are just other servers that can run the lib tests, the syntax tests, the deploy tests, or whatever. And those all get farmed out from the delivery server. Yes.
And can you build on Windows nodes?
And can you build on Windows nodes? The answer is at least we've done work to get there. And I know Tom did some work on build nodes in Windows build nodes. There are Windows build nodes. Now I can say it with confidence because 2 people back me up. Of course you can do it on Windows node. Why wouldn't you? Windows is a first-class citizen.
Awesome.
Haven't you heard?
Yes, I have.
So then we've been talking about one cookbook.
Yeah. We actually have been talking about one application, right? This isn't actually a cookbook.
Yes. Okay.
Keep asking your questions.
So the using environment implies that we are bringing more than one thing together.
Yes.
Yeah, this.
Yes.
So I understand that we're talking about application A. It has a delivery cookbook.
Yes, it does.
Which defines what you do in each phase.
Yes.
Right? So when it comes to union then,
Yes.
where does that delivery cookbook live?
Okay.
For the union?
Great. So I'm gonna like back up a little bit, and then I'm gonna get back to your question because I also want to come back to your question. What happens when I have made a change in this application and the other team has made a change to this application, and they all actually are one service? So who gets to deliver first, and does it matter?
Or they're different services.
If they're different services, so the first thing that you want to think about is, okay, what we're delivering is a service here again. This service maybe has many components that make up that service that are just dependent things that all come together to deliver this service. If I have a truly independent service, what it probably has is a completely independent pipeline.
So you have one for each service.
You would have one for each service. So as an example, we have learnchef.io and we have www.chef.io. And you can change www.chef.io without impacting learn, and vice versa, right?
It becomes different than the first impression I had.
Okay, cool. So you would totally have 2 different pipelines for those things because they're 2 different services. Yes. But let's say that learn.chef.io was made up of microservices because that's all the rage. Like, why should we run a website with just one application? It should be 100 applications that make up learnchef.io. Microservices are a thing. So, but the important thing is that all of those microservices have to work together in concert. And so as you create changes, you'll have acceptance pipelines for each one of your components, but then they all come together into your union environment. And so if I have a change in this application and a change in this application, I can only deliver one of those 2 changes at a time. So when I click the deliver button on application A, it's going to take this change from application A and deploy it to the union environment. It's going to take the current version of application B, and then maybe cookbook C and D, their current version, and run them all in the union environment. Do these all work together? The individual tests on application A may have passed, but when we take this change to application A and run it on infrastructure that's configured with cookbook C, maybe they don't work so well together. So now my union environment is broken. My pipeline stops. The build has gone red. We have a belief within our organization that when the build turns red, we stop it and we fix it. And so maybe what we find is that the way that we fix this environment is either we have to make a change to the application, or maybe we need to change one of the subcomponents or the dependencies for this application. So we change Cookbook C such that the underlying infrastructure supports the application change. When we deliver this change, it moves into the Union environment, and now Union is green again, it's working. So we'll now pick up this change, run it in rehearsal to make sure we get a clean build there. And once rehearsal is green, we'll then push it off to delivery. So I told you I was going to take a big step back and then work my way back into your question. And I'm not sure I've answered your question, so you might need to ask it again.
About the delivery cookbook.
Oh, yeah, the
covering
delivery
what happens in each phase.
Yes.
Right? I can understand there's a one-to-one mapping between, say, your application, the repo, and a delivery cookbook.
Yes.
And it's not clear to me where the cookbook lives that governs what happens in Union rehearsal and delivery.
Okay. So the thing that I want to do is still not answer that question because I want to look at code to make sure I answer it properly. Yeah. Because it's weird, but I don't want to lie to you. Like I usually don't have a problem with that, but right now I don't want to do that. I'm gonna like parking lot that question, which is code for I'm never gonna answer that question for you. So it's clear. Okay, so can we check in on our pipeline? How's it going? Okay, so it tells us here that Union has completed. Rehearsal is currently running, and if we click on rehearsal, we can see like what's going on. So the provision has passed, and the deploy step is running. So let's go back to the slides then and just talk about a couple of other things. Now, there's a lot to this. There are a lot of stages, and then within each stage, there's a number of phases. A really good way to approach delivery when you first get started with it is think about this as a canvas. So sit down and think about the service that you're going to deploy or the application that you're going to deploy, and break it down into what happens before you have the artifact, which maybe is a cookbook, maybe is a compiled static website, maybe is an RPM or a Debian package or some Windows package. What are the things that happen before it's an artifact, and what are the things that happen after it's an artifact? And if you lay out this sort of canvas, you can then start to layer in, well, what if I'm deploying a Java application? Well, my unit tests for my Java application are going to use JUnit. I'm going to lint it with lint4j. The syntax check is going to be Java C. I can start to have this conversation on the whiteboard and figure out what are all of the things that we're going to put in. What you might discover is that your application is poorly tested today. I know. I'm not talking about your application. I'm talking about a theoretical application that might be poorly tested, where you will find holes where things just like aren't happening in these various stages. Again, not your application. But this gives you a framework to talk about, right, well, what would we put in here? And start to think about writing one test at a time. Maybe I don't have any tests in my quality phase. Let me go write one quality test. What's the first test I can write? And then over time, I can layer in more tests. So these are the things that happen pre-artifact. Once you move through the build stage, you then have an artifact that you can move into the post-artifact phases. So how do you deploy? Maybe you're going to spin up nodes on EC2, create environments there with Chef provisioning. What does your smoke test look like? Maybe you just curl a URL and see what's the status code that I got back. How do I deploy this thing? Well, it's a Java application, so I'm going to load the jar into Tomcat. What are my functional tests? Maybe I'm running Selenium or Cucumber or something against that. Of course, we're not deploying a Java application right now. We're deploying Learn Chef, which is an application that's mostly Markdown. And what's the underlying framework, Maggie?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know it uses Middleman as well.
It might be Middleman. It's one of those like take the Markdown files and turn it into a stack of HTML pages. Yeah. It's one of those frameworks. I think it's Markdown to HTML. That's not what it's called.
Right.
But like, so here's what our canvas looks like. And surprise, surprise, we do have some holes. So our unit tests, we actually run RSpec against it. So there are some RSpec tests that we can run against that. Our lint checks, we just skip that as we saw in delivery. So maybe one of the next tests we want to write is the lint test, like the
SCSS lint.
Yes, thank you. I'm no web developer. Thank you for making me honest. So we might run that lint here. Our syntax check, again, we're skipping. So we're skipping all of these things. But the publish what we do is we run this markdown through middleman or whatever it is. We're going to assume it's middleman for the rest of the night. It's middleman. So we run that through middleman, and it creates a tarball of our static HTML pages. That when we go to provision, so that's our artifact, is the tarball. When we go to provision it, we actually set up an S3 bucket where we're going to provision that tarball. We front it with Fastly, which is a CDN. So we're going to set up the Fastly caches for it to make sure that that's all working. When it comes to deploying, we'll upload that tarball into those S3 buckets. We'll flush the Fastly cache. Our smoke tests say, well, go crawl the home page. Make sure that you're getting a 200 back. There's probably more to our smoke test that we could add in, but for now, that's all we do. So if you come and find that Learn Chef is down, probably if you crawl the homepage, you'll get a 200. So is it really down? I think it might be you, not us. And then we run some functional tests on it. So we have this tool called Link Checker that will basically parse all of the HTML looking for any link, and it will curl every link that's on the website to make sure that we're getting back a good HTTP response, whether that's a 301 or a 200. Maybe it follows the 301s. I don't know. It's awesome. And then also our functional does the notify Slack. So we've seen some of those Slack notifications. I hope we have some more Slack notifications.
I think it might. Just for acceptance.
All right, so let's look at the pipeline and see what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so union is done, rehearsal is done, and now it's moving into the delivered phase. So in delivered phase, we have the provision has passed, and the deploy phase is running. When this is done, you'll be able to go to learn.chef.io and see that like plus 100 better link. Maybe back to the slides. I don't know what other slides we have. Find that out. Before I maybe try to answer that other question. Oh, so the other cool thing about delivery that we've seen throughout the night is you can actually visualize all of the changes moving through your pipeline. The really great thing about having, or another great thing about having this common pipeline, since all of your projects follow this, you can actually get a good sense of where change is across all of the projects in your organization. Maybe you could go to the dashboard in delivery and we could look at that.
Yeah, of course.
It's not a slide. So here we can see all of the active projects, what's happening, where things are stalled, where they're breaking, what's currently running. We also have a full log of all of these changes that actually get sent off to Chef Analytics, so we can track and monitor over time all of the changes that are happening. Let's just go back to our change and see if it's delivered yet. Yes? Do we have some way of grouping those displays so that you can look at, like, oh, that's not very DevOps. You should care about, we're all the same family. You should care about what's going on over there. So within the Chef Delivery Server, we have this concept of organizations, which is very similar to the organizations concept that you have on the Chef server itself. So truly isolated environment. So if you really don't care about what they're doing, shame on you. But it's cool. Like you could have your own separate organization. So an organization is the way that you can control or constrain what you see on that dashboard. Other filters or anything like that. So delivery is an awesome product that is changing very frequently. And what we would love is that feedback. I want filters on my dashboard so that I can see just the things I care about without having to go through setting up another organization. In other words, no. How are we doing?
Let's see.
So I'm starting to get nervous. So I just wanted to finish. So it's running our functional test now. The lint checker is happening. So here's the cool thing. If it's running our functional test, we can actually go to learnchef.io right now and see it in production. Like it's already been deployed. We're now running functional tests against the production and for the delivered environment. So if we go to the real learn.chef.io, let's see if our change has made it all the way through. Look at that! That's awesome. That might be our last slide too, is it? There must be one more.
Couple
Oh,
more.
there's two more. Look at that.
Wait, can we go back one? Sorry,
Back a slide.
back a slide, please.
Yes.
What's that table?
Oh,
What is
so
that?
this table, oh, we can show this into the delivery UI,
We
right?
could, yeah.
You know it better than I do.
Ooh. I
Oh,
haven't
it's
looked at the
true.
delivery UI in a while because we use GitHub now.
What happens?
If you drop down, there's an autoplug.
Yeah, like up
Mhm.
here.
There it is.
There's that table.
That's different.
It's different than what?
Different than the one in the slide.
Then the one in the
do you know why
slide.
it's different than the one in the slide? Look, it's kind of the same.
Oh.
Action status, event time submitted. What does it show?
It looks like it's cropped. Yeah, it's cropped.
Failures. Okay. Got it.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't fail.
No
Maggie's
failures
amazing.
today. Yeah.
Like everything she does just works every time. She's like Colt 45. So-
It's quite a comparison. Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
Through the audit logs, you can find that. Yes. So each project that you have will have a build cookbook. And so when you have a project that you want to configure to use delivery, you'll use the delivery command line application or command line interface, the delivery CLI, and you'll run a command called delivery init. And what it will do is create a .delivery directory within that project. And within that, there will be a build cookbook. And that build cookbook has a recipe for each one of those phases. So as an example, you'll have a lint recipe, you'll have a syntax recipe, you'll have a unit recipe. By default, when you do delivery init, what we give you is a cookbook, a delivery cookbook called the delivery truck. Now the delivery truck cookbook is an open source cookbook that is specially built for delivering cookbooks. So in the lint test, it's going to run Google Cop and Food Critic. In the unit test, it's going to run Chef's Spec. In the syntax test, it's going to run Knife Cookbook Test. So that's what happens in your build cookbook. But what you can do, again, if you're running a Java application, you don't want any of those things. So you can actually move into your unit tests. Maybe you're using Maven to run those tests, or JUnit to run those tests. So you just go in and write the recipe that orchestrates whatever that phase is for you. Yes?
So in this case, during the this first stage,
Yes.
for something like a Java application,
Uh-huh.
you're probably going to want to compile, transform the
Yes.
source code
Yep.
into a jar or something like that, and
Right.
then run tests on that.
Ha.
Now, I noticed that the different phases could run on different nodes.
Yes.
Does that mean that each build node is going to redo the same build if I need that output?
So if we go back here, we could talk about it on this page, but I'd rather talk about it here. So what we're going to do, if we're running a Java application, we're building an artifact.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're running anything through delivery pipeline, there are a couple of things that are maybe new to the way that you need to think about it. One thing that's new is you need to think about, we're doing continuous integration. The minute I hit approve, we're integrating this change back into our master branch. The other thing is our output is going to be an artifact. And that artifact gets generated in the build phase. So we're actually running our lint, syntax, and unit before we actually create that artifact. So you'll run these tests against the source code. And then as part of your publish phase, you're actually going to build that artifact itself. So you'll compile that Java source code into a jar, and then take that jar and put it into, I don't know, where do you put your jars?
I get that part. It's
Yeah.
the unit tests oftentimes need compiled code.
Ah, sure. So if what you need is compiled code here, you could, during this phase, you could compile that code and then run your unit tests against that compiled code.
And then you would recompile it again.
And then, yes, when you get to the build phase, what's going to happen is you will have merged those code changes back into master. So now when you compile it, you might get a very different.
So I'll compile it again in the unit phase, and then I'll under the build stage,
Yes,
and then I'll compile it again and publish.
maybe. Like what you know better than I do is what should these phases do.
Now, don't the phases, if you have more than one build node,
If
don't
you,
they get distributed?
yes, if you have more than one build node, so if what I had was one build node, I would run only one of these at a time.
So
But if I had multiple, I could actually run, and some of them could run in parallel.
Sure.
As an example, lint, syntax, and unit can totally run in parallel. But your publish has to wait until these other ones are done. You don't want to just publish it and then find out that your lit test fails.
So
Right?
there isn't a general way of like sharing outputs between phases.
There is
then?
not a general way of sharing outputs.
So you may be doing some things redundant.
You may be doing some things twice. Yes. Done.
Are there, I know not to mention a competing product, but Jenkins, for example,
Yeah, no, you can totally mention
has
Jenkins.
labels. We can say, I want to run this job on a Linux node. I want to run this job on a Windows node. I want to run this job on a node that has Xcode 6.3.1.
Yes.
Or whatever. Is there some way of saying, I have a dependency that the build node has this thing installed that I need to compile my application?
So when the chef server, in the chef server and in your cookbook, in your build cookbook, you essentially say, what are the build nodes that I should use? And you determine that you can determine that either by hard coding what those host names are, or you can execute a chef search. So I could say, my build nodes include a Windows node and a node that's running CentOS 7.
Nice.
And go and run on all of those build nodes. Or you could tag your nodes and say, give me all of the nodes that are tagged with build project X.
What if we need to run the syntax and unit on one of each, for example? Like,
Yes.
Because like say like Chef project.
Sure. We need to run that on.
Could you just show us the node interface for delivery real fast? Like, is that possible, or just a quick?
Yeah, like that seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Sure.
I don't know if I can do it or not.
We can
Put it out.
try.
We can totally poke around a little bit
Mhm.
and see.
Because this
See,
we
see
don't
what I
know.
mean? See what I mean by we? Look how much of a pro Maggie is.
Right.
Like, yep, we sure can.
Well, no, what I was getting at is that in this case we went to a S3 bucket, so there's not really a concept of a node.
That's correct.
But
right.
Maybe we have a Java application that maybe needs like a real artifact.
So the way that it here's our GitHub repo, right? So if we look here, there's a delivery folder here, a delivery directory, and here you have your config.json, and this is where we say, as an example, which phases are we going to skip during our process? So we know to skip lint because it's in our delivery config. That's part of this, and then within this we then have the delivery cookbook also. Oh, and so you see that it says the path to the build cookbook is the .delivery directory, the build cookbook. So it's this current directory. Here's the build cookbook. And within this, we have a bunch of recipes. And then within that, so the real answer is I don't actually know where all that stuff is. So I'm going to just poke around for a minute and maybe we'll find it.
Learn together.
Yeah, we can totally learn together. And if someone else in the room knows where I should look, you could totally tell me. They did. They're like, what we want to do is make that dude. It is indeed middleman. All right, thanks for confirming that. That's cool. Awesome. Let's see. Maybe. So maybe the deploy. Maybe this will tell us where we deploy to.
But basically what you're saying though is that the actual the nodes that you would if there was an actual node to deliver to,
yes,
it's all being defined in the code.
It's all in the code
rather than in the delivery web.
Yes, it's definitely not in the. It's not like in the web interface
it's like
where
it's per application.
It's going to be per application.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so
because Jenkins has an actual list of slaves that it'll keep, and you can put a label expression on it or something.
Right. So there's this cool thing that happens with delivery. Think about Chef from 2 years ago. Chef was infrastructure as code. When you think about delivery is now workflow as code, right? We're capturing your entire workflow for your delivery pipeline in this delivery cookbook. And so it's all code, which also means that it can all be tested, just like any other code. We could actually have a delivery pipeline for our delivery cookbook. And delivery itself, like the product, we ship it with delivery. So when we build delivery hosts itself and runs all of these same tests and everything. Not the middleman tests, of course, but the delivery tests. And delivery includes, like, the delivery CLI is written in Rust. So you've got Rust tests that are happening there, plus Erlang, plus Git, plus all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. But it's all in code. You're not going to go into a web UI and
Sure.
be like, these are the nodes that equal the build nodes for this particular
No, that's great. If anything, I prefer that.
Because then you can also version your
Exactly.
workflow and like roll back to a previous state of your workflow. Rollbacks are a lot, let's be clear. But you can see the changes that have happened. Yes.
So Nathan, we've seen one application that has its delivery cookbook.
Yes.
Let's say I've got N applications.
Yes.
And I want to apply the same workflow to them all.
Yes.
But each, it appears to me, will have their own delivery cookbooks. Does that mean I need to go and update each one when I want to make
So each will have their own delivery cookbook, but that delivery cookbook could actually be a shared cookbook. So if I were to do, as an example, if I run delivery init on just their project, what it's actually going to do is point to, I believe it will point to the cookbook on GitHub that is called delivery truck. And so if I have 8 different applications that are all going to use the same testing process or the same workflow, I can write a common cookbook, and then I can just point to that cookbook in my delivery config. So my delivery config here said, use the delivery truck cookbook within this project. But your delivery truck cookbook could be elsewhere. Does that make sense?
It was in the JSON file.
Can you go back to the delivery config.json? Yeah.
This one?
Yep. So here we have the path to the delivery cookbook. We could have all of our applications, all of our delivery cookbooks could point to that same build cookbook. The other thing that we find happens a lot is delivery truck is the common way to deploy a cookbook. Maybe you actually write a wrapper cookbook around that slightly modifies the way that delivery truck works, or it just uses, maybe it reuses the common delivery truck's lint and syntax, but you run a different type of unit tests against your cookbook. You just override that one recipe.
So you might locate the build, your common build cookbook for a certain type of application.
Exactly.
As a peer cookbook to your
Yep.
thing.
You might have a Java build cookbook. You might have a Rails build cookbook, a cookbook build cookbook. Yes.
Can you pull from GitHub?
Yes,
Rather
you can
than a
pull
path.
from GitHub. Yes, instead of a path. All right. That is what we have to show for you tonight. Yeah, I'll take one more question.
Can you use delivery truck separate from delivery? Or is it designed to work with delivery?
So
I mean, I know it's designed to work with it, but
yes. So let's talk for a minute about delivery, what's open source and what do you have to pay for it, because that will answer that question also. So there are parts of delivery that are open source. The parts that are open source include the delivery CLI, or the command line interface with delivery, and the delivery truck cookbook. And you can absolutely use both of those without having a delivery server. You can actually, so if you have the delivery, it's weird, right?
it is super weird.
Yeah, like that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because we don't really talk about it yet. But here's what you could do. If you have the delivery CLI, you can actually run a command that is like delivery job, lint, syntax, unit. And you can have a delivery cookbook that defines what those jobs do, and it can actually run that for you locally. You can do a delivery review, and if your Git repository is not a delivery server, it won't push to a delivery server. It could push a branch to GitHub for you. You could conceivably have something like Jenkins watching after that repo and pick it up. Jenkins could actually run the delivery CLI internally, kick off those jobs for you, and do the orchestration there. So you absolutely can use the delivery CLI and the delivery truck cookbook without using delivery as a whole. The reason why you would want to use delivery, though, is you get the great visualization of the change that's happening, and we give you that common unified workflow. This is what your pipeline looks like for every application that you deploy through delivery.
So if you were doing the command line interface workflow that you just described,
Yes.
There's no centralized server then.
So
Is that correct?
delivery is built to work with Git as your source code management. So when you do a delivery review, which is the submit change thing that we did, so Maggie did that just as a pull request to a Git repo. Instead of using Git to push that branch, what we could do is use the delivery CLI and write this command called delivery review. And what that will do is push a new branch into the Git repository that your delivery config is pointing to.
Which could be on your local system.
Could be your local system. It could even be a GitLab server. So yeah, sure, we could totally do GitLab. It doesn't matter. It's a Git repository that's somewhere that your delivery config pushes to. So it would push a branch there.
Okay.
And then you could pick that up with workflow tooling that is not Chef delivery.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's what we have tonight. We will totally stick around for more comments and questions and discussion around this. I hope you learned a little bit about delivery tonight. I'd like to thank Maggie for doing all the hard work. And also, I'm just going to stop the video stream. So if you've tuned in and watched this live, thank you for joining us. We wish you well and good night. And that's it.